I want to remain as anonymous as possible for this one, as it's still something that haunts me to this day. The event left me with PTSD, and it completely scarred me. I'm changing all names and locations, so there's no way it can be traced back to me. Growing up, I was always a bit of a recluse. Even in school, I was labeled as having antisocial tendencies. Teachers would tell my parents that I had issues interacting with other kids, and I was placed in those 20-minute special classes for speech and behavior in elementary school. At the time, I didn't understand why I was being singled out. The other kids didn't seem to notice, but I was always on the outside looking in. Things didn't get better in middle school. Social pressure and cliques took over, and I continued to be the awkward, introverted kid. High school was no different, and by the time I was 21, I had already developed a deep sense of social discomfort, especially when it came to dating. My peers were all confidently in relationships, and I felt like an outsider. But that changed when I met someone on Tinder at 23. Her name was Emily. We went on a few dates, and I felt like things were going well. She seemed great at first, easy to talk to, funny and engaging. It was a whirlwind romance, and before I knew it, we became boyfriend and girlfriend. But the honeymoon phase didn't last forever. As the relationship progressed, I started noticing red flags. Emily became obsessed with knowing where I was at all times. She constantly asked where I was, who I was with, and why I was taking so long to respond. It wasn't just occasional, "Hey, what's up?" It was constant, every minute of every day. It started to feel suffocating, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I felt guilty and didn't want to hurt her feelings. One night, I was at my friend Phil's house, hanging out with him and another friend, Mark. We were just relaxing, talking and watching TV. It was a Friday night, and I didn't think anything of it until Emily showed up at Phil's house. She marched downstairs without hesitation, and I could immediately feel the tension. She was furious. She yelled at me for not answering her texts about going to some winery the next day. I tried to tell her we could talk later, but she demanded that I leave with her right then and there. I apologized to my friends, but the situation was escalating quickly. Outside in the street, we argued. She insisted on coming home with me, but I refused. I needed space. I told her not to follow me, but when I got home, things got worse. She started blowing up my phone with texts, and when I didn't respond, she knocked on my door. She rang the doorbell over and over, pounding on it like it was the end of the world. It got so bad that my neighbor came outside to ask what was going on. He calmly told her to go home, but I could hear her screaming from behind the door. The whole situation was unsettling. The next day, I decided I needed to take control of the situation. I stopped sharing my location with her. That's when the real craziness started. She texted me, demanding to know why I had stopped sharing my location. She was angry, accusing me of hiding something from her. Her behavior was becoming more erratic by the day. Then, one night, I came home late after hanging out with my friends. I was starving, so I heated up some food and decided to watch a movie. But as soon as the microwave beeped, everything went silent. I heard a door in my house click open. I froze. The layout of my townhouse was strange, and the door separating the kitchen and dining room was closed. I was sure no one should be there. I grabbed the TV remote and muted the TV, trying to listen carefully. It was then that I heard the unmistakable sound of the door opening. I quickly checked the dining room. No one was there, but then I noticed that the door separating the two rooms had been opened. My blood ran cold. I never left that door open. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and called 911. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting, but I was terrified. I told the dispatcher that I thought my crazy ex-girlfriend had broken into my house. Then, I waited outside for police to arrive. I led the officer inside when they arrived, and we searched the place together. We checked every closet, every under-the-bed area, and even the mini attic, but no one was there. I was rattled, but the police assured me it was nothing, just a case of my mind playing tricks on me. But I wasn't so sure. My heart was still racing. I went to bed that night, but sleep didn't come easy. I had a feeling something wasn't right. Then my phone buzzed. I looked at it and saw several texts from a random number. It was Emily. She was begging me to talk, saying how sorry she was, and that she wanted to see me. She sent a barrage of texts asking if I was awake, demanding that I open up to her. But then, something even worse happened. Out of nowhere, I heard a scream coming from my closet. Emily's voice. My blood ran cold as the closet door suddenly burst open. I barely had time to react. She was standing there with a knife, and she started stabbing the door, trying to get to me. I had to act fast. I screamed, "I love you, stop." To my surprise, she stopped, momentarily calmed. I quickly called 911 again, whispering into the phone as I kept the door shut. I convinced her that I was going through a rough time, that I still loved her, and that I'd be willing to work things out. She dropped the knife, and that's when I took my chance. I tackled her to the ground and yelled my address into the phone, all while holding her down. The police arrived in what felt like seconds, breaking down the front door. They put Emily in cuffs, and I could hear her hysterical sobs as they took her away. The aftermath was long and painful. I never wanted to be in the public eye for this, so I kept everything as quiet as possible. Emily was convicted of some serious charges, but the whole ordeal left me scarred. I spent so much time focused on impressing her, on trying to make everything seem perfect, that I missed the warning signs. That night, when I thought everything was over, it had only just begun. It all started during Halloween when I was in 6th grade. I stayed after school to help decorate for the Halloween carnival at my school. There was this kid named Chris who also stayed late. We got along well, and he was a funny and cool kid. There was nothing about him that made me uncomfortable until one day, everything changed. A couple of weeks later, a group of girls from my grade approached me, their eyes wide with excitement. They told me that I had a secret admirer and that he would be texting me that night. I was curious, but also a little nervous. Who could it be? That night, I received a message from Chris on Facebook Messenger. I had completely forgotten that I'd added him on Halloween. The message read, "Maya, I need to talk to you." I immediately felt a wave of unease. I quickly replied, asked him what was going on, and waited for his response. When his message finally came through, my stomach dropped. It was a long paragraph where he confessed his feelings for me and explained how he had been trying to impress me during recess with his soccer skills. He said he'd grown tired of being ignored and ended the message with, "I want you to notice me. So, will you be my girlfriend?" I was in shock. I barely knew this kid, and I definitely didn't feel the same way. I quickly texted him back, letting him down gently, saying I didn't like him that way and just wanted to be friends. But his response wasn't what I expected. He kept asking why, over and over again, and I had to keep coming up with reasons. Eventually, he stopped texting, but the damage was done. The next morning, things got worse. Some of Chris's friends started telling me that Chris wanted to kiss me and that he was going to do it, whether I liked it or not. This terrified me. I decided to tell my teacher, who advised me to stay inside during recess and lunch. She said that if Chris ever got too close, to just run back to the classroom. But I wasn't convinced that was enough. So I went straight to the principal's office and told them everything. They assured me they would handle it. What happened next made everything even worse. Later in the week, as I was walking home from school, I heard a knock at my front door. I hadn't even been inside for more than 2 minutes before I heard it. I peeked through the window and saw someone hiding behind a car across the street. It was Chris. My heart started racing. My mom opened the door to find a note on the floor. I read it aloud and said that there was a surprise waiting for me under my brother's Cadillac in the driveway. My mom checked, but there was nothing there. That day, my brother's car stopped working. We never figured out exactly what Chris had done to it, but he somehow managed to ruin the car. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. Things didn't stop there. Chris's friends kept harassing me, telling me to give him a chance, that he would treat me well. I even caught Chris secretly taking pictures of me walking home. I was terrified. Every morning, I'd wake up to messages from him saying things like, "I can't wait to see you today," or "I bet you look beautiful." The worst part? Chris knew where I lived. I thought I had it all under control, but one day, I got a call into the counselor's office. I expected her to tell me that something would be done about Chris's behavior, or that the cops would get involved. Instead, what I heard was even worse. The counselor told me, "Boys will be boys. They do crazy things when they're in love. You should feel flattered, not mad." She said this like it was normal, like it was just part of growing up. I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. I was just a 6th grader, and I was being sexually harassed and stalked by a boy I barely knew. That afternoon, I went home and told my mom everything the counselor had said. My mom was furious. She immediately called the principal and the counselor, demanding that they do something before something terrible happened. I remember her saying, "What are you waiting for? For something bad to happen to her." The school remained silent. They didn't take it seriously. But the nightmare didn't end there. One weekend, when my parents went shopping, I was sitting in my room watching YouTube on my iPad when I heard something tapping on my window. This was strange. My window was on the 2nd floor, and the only things that hit it were birds. But the sound kept happening. It wasn't random. Someone was throwing something at my window. I opened the curtain and looked down to see Chris holding rocks, staring up at me. He had somehow figured out which window was mine. I quickly ran to make sure all the doors and windows were locked, and when I returned to my room, I saw 4 messages from Chris. "Why did you leave? I just want to talk. I'm sorry. All I wanted was a kiss. Please forgive me." I blocked him immediately. After that, things seemed to settle, but the memory of what he did will never leave me. It all started when I was 22 and began seeing a guy named Hunter, whom I met on a dating app. At first, everything seemed fine. We went on 4 dates over a little more than a month. The first was a simple coffee date, a quick screening to see if he was normal. Our second date was at a bar, where we had a few drinks and had a pleasant time. But by the third date, things began to feel off. It was a dinner date, and I started wondering if I was really clicking with him or if something about him just wasn't right. He kissed me that night, but it felt more like a way to keep things moving than anything genuine. Then came our 4th and final date. We met up again for drinks, but I wasn't excited this time. I was paying closer attention to his behavior, and that's when I noticed how strange and almost creepy he was. He drank way too much and became overly touchy, tried to kiss me multiple times. I wasn't a fan of PDA, especially at a bar full of people. I gently turned him down and tried to end the night, but he didn't take the hint. He insisted on walking me to my car, and when we got there, he bluntly asked if we could go home together. I politely refused, citing that I was tired and had work the next day. As I drove home, I became increasingly paranoid. There was a car behind me, and it seemed to be following me, making the same turns as I did. At a stoplight, I realized it was Hunter's car. I texted him, "Are you following me?" He responded quickly, saying, "Yes, just making sure you get home okay." I called him, but he didn't answer. I pulled over and texted him to stop following me. He briefly stopped in the street before driving off. I thought it was over, but the next morning, he sent me an apology text, claiming he didn't mean to make me uncomfortable. He suggested we do something low-key next time, like dinner at his place. I didn't reply. Then he followed up with, "Oh no, is the vibe dead?" I finally texted him, explaining that I didn't think our personalities clicked and I wanted to focus on myself. His response was angry. He accused me of leading him on and demanded I pay him back for the dates he paid for. I blocked him, but the harassment didn't end there. I started receiving no caller ID, phone calls. I ignored them, thinking he'd get the message. The next day, when I came home from work, I found a bouquet of flowers on my doorstep with a note asking for another chance. How did he know where I lived? I sent him one last text. "Do not contact me again or come near my house, or I'll file for restraining order." I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. One night, I woke up to strange noises coming from downstairs. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then I heard the unmistakable sound of a door opening. I quickly crawled under my bed and called 911. I texted my family, asking who was home. The footsteps grew louder, and then I heard a man's voice. It sounded like Hunter's voice. Terrified, I stayed quiet, praying my phone wouldn't make a sound. He rummaged through my drawers and sat on my bed for what felt like forever. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, I heard him leave, and I called 911 again, whispering into the phone. The police arrived, and after a thorough search of the house, they discovered that all the windows were unlocked. One window was big enough for someone to crawl through. I filed a report and successfully obtained a restraining order against Hunter. But even then, I never felt completely safe. To this day, I sometimes wonder if he ever found out where I live now.